Immigration is a very important issue right now. How do we, especially as Christians, respond to the needs of people who are our guests here in our own country? Please, stay tuned. Hi, my name is Father Mike Manning. God bless you. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm coming to you with the challenge of being able to experience God in your life. And how does God enter into that in the midst of all the other messages about finances and power and control? What about God? And one of the questions that we really are challenged with is, how do we, as people who believe in God and follow God, how do we deal with the problem of, or the challenge of, immigration? People that come and live in our world, and sometimes they do it without having documentation, and sometimes they're running over the borders and we have images of them that are sometimes distorted. What should be the real response that we as Catholic Christians give to the situation of immigration? I'm delighted to have, thank you very much. Hilda, it's wonderful to have you with us here. Before we jump in, I just want to ask you just the simple question. Why is immigration significant to you, and why are you involved in immigration as an official of the Diocese of San Bernardino?
Well, I came to the United States at 9 years old. I came with my family, so I'm an immigrant myself. I think a lot of the immigrants right now, they live in the shadows and they have this great fear to live a normal life, you know, the way that we are called to live, a life of dignity. And that's, those are the struggles and the stories that I hear on an everyday basis. I was hired as the Justice for Immigrant Campaign Coordinator for the Diocese of San Bernardino. And these are the stories. And part of the job is not also to deal with the fear of the immigrant community and then talk about policy and changes, but also to help them integrate into our society and find that dignity that God calls us all to live wherever we're at.
I've often thought of that in the parish where I lived and where I served as pastor right here in San Bernardino. I probably would say that there were 70% of the parishioners were non-documented. You know, they weren't those documented people. And one of the real factors that I often tried to be sensitive to was the great fear that they had to live in, with continual wanting to be here, but at the same time living in a great insecurity. Would you speak to that?
And that insecurity does not come only in the way of living out and walking their children to school, or finding a job, because there are so many uncertainties. But lately, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a lot of raids, immigration raids. The stories that they tell us, somebody hears a knock at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. in the morning, they open up the door, and immigration officials just come in, and they eventually take the adults in the home.
And leaving the children
And leaving
there?
the children behind. Yes, sometimes alone, sometimes they're able to go to their neighbors, sometimes they're able to call somebody to come and look after them. But the stories are horrific, and these children are left unattended. And sometimes they go into the system, our own system, where they take care of them, but they're lost for the parents once they are released from the detention centers.
Tell me this, let's jump back a little bit, and I don't want to play down anyway that horrific experience of being separated from your family. Tell me a little bit about, from your experience, why do people want to come to our country, and why would they go through all of the insecurity and struggles that are involved? What are some of the motivations that you've experienced?
Well, one of the reasons that I hear a lot of the times is the ability to work. For whatever reason, whatever systems that they have in their own countries, they're not able to have jobs. They lose their jobs, they lose their lands. The farm workers are losing their lands where they're at. So they want to be able to go and find a job somewhere else, to be able to provide for their family. The other reason is to be reunited with their loved ones. In my case, my family was the last left in Mexico after both sides, both grandparents on both sides, both my mother's and my father's, were already living here. And they had already petitioned for us, but the process was taking a very, very long time. So that longing to be reunited with your family is there, and I think that's the other cause of immigration.
So and jobs and family.
Jobs and family
unity.
Family unity. My grandfather began coming to the United States early on in the 1940s, must have been, with a bracero program, a program that invited the farm workers to come and work on the farms here in California. And so he began coming, began experiencing, loved the culture, stayed for a couple of years. Then he was sent back. Then he came back again, sent back again. The third time he came, he realized that he needed to become a U.S. citizen if he wanted to live here, which he did. And then he slowly brought all his family, his wife and his children, to live close to him. And so that's the story.
But the process was very, very painful, wasn't it?
Painful. I mean, nobody wants to get up and leave their country, their hometown. Nobody.
That's what's important to say.
Yeah, nobody wants to just get up and say, I'm leaving today. I will no longer live in this place. No. I'm gonna go find something better. You know, so that is the case for many other families that they find themselves here. Another big issue is war. Those countries that go into war, and so they begin seeking asylum of different sorts, you know, refugees. They want to become refugees just to survive. So there's a lot of reasons why people become immigrants. And we live in a global, it's no longer just a national issue. I believe that immigration is now a global issue, a global phenomenon where people just must leave their country of origins and move somewhere else, seeking to a better life.
One of the real struggles we come up with is trying to relate to people who are immigrants, and I thank you very much for coming and being on the program, because your face and your presence and your attitude is something that can be able to help us to perhaps have a new understanding of what it means to be an immigrant. Could you tell us, you've mentioned some of the stories from war, from looking for jobs and union with family, which are three really big things. Could you tell us some stories that maybe pop into your mind that would say, this would really be able to give you a clear understanding of the terrible pain and the struggle of what it means to be an immigrant?
Yeah. Well, you have mine. At a very young age, my mother wanted to be reunited with her parents, but she couldn't for the longest time. The immigration process makes it almost impossible sometimes for the relatives to be able to come on over. Even if the father, in this case my grandfather, was a U.S. citizen. Once my mother married, she was no longer seen as part of the family, so she couldn't come with the family. Now she needed to start her own process, which we did in Mexico, but we never heard about it. So eventually we came here, but we were undocumented. We were undocumented.
But the drive was to be with your family.
But the drive was to be with our family. My grandparents on both sides, all my uncles and my aunts lived here, and so that was part of their longing. They longed to be reunited with a family. Now later on I would hear the stories of La Migra, immigration. If you see those green vans, they separate families because they'll ask you if you have documents to live here in this country, and if you don't, they take you away. And so my fear as a child was not knowing when I was gonna come home, wait for my mom or dad, and not find them there. So this was there's a sense of anxiety in that, and not allowing you to live a normal, happy child life because you're so worried about when is this gonna happen. Later on as a teenager, starting to work in various, doing various odd jobs at different places, I couldn't hold a job because after a few months, when they realized that my Social Security was not valid, they would ask me about it. So what I would do is I would thank them for that job and move on to another one. These are the struggles that people don't realize that the undocumented go through. And so it makes your life just a little harsher, a little harsher. But we survive. And so here I am. This is the face of an immigrant who was undocumented at one time, and I'm happy to say that I am now a U.S. citizen. And that's part of my passion for working with the immigrants, is I can relate to the stories. But the stories have gotten much more sadder. You know, we just heard a story of a father who, after living here for almost 20 years, stopped at one of those DUI stop points.
DUI, what's that?
DUI, where they have those stop checks, where they'll check to make sure that nobody's drinking and driving. He was asked for his driver's license. He doesn't have it because now the law states that if you're here undocumented, you're not worthy of a driver's license. And so he didn't have it. He was questioned, detained, and sent back to Mexico. He was deported.
How many years had he been here?
He had been here almost 2 decades, almost 20 years. Well, his family and 4 children lived here in the city of Paris. And so he wanted to come back to the family.
Of course.
Unfortunately, he died while trying to cross the desert. Passed away. It's a horrific story. I mean, just the pain and the suffering, and now we have a widow and 4 orphan children because the dad wanted to be reunited with his family and because the system hadn't given him a chance. He had some proceedings going on for immigration, but our system is just broken. It's not working for anybody.
And people are being hurt, and that's not what the law is about. The law is not about hurting innocent people with a breaking of justice.
And that's correct. I believe that the law should be there to protect us, yes, but a lot of the times our laws are being voted on or being made just so that a few are benefited from them, but the majority are being hurt by it. So therefore, why we should be very aware of what's out there, what kind of bills. There's a lot of talk right now, and we're very excited about immigration reform, you know, but we need to be aware that a lot of those little principles can be great for some, but not too many.
Gotcha.
So as Catholics, we are called, and I am so happy to say that our Catholic bishops are in the forefront of this, you know, meeting with congressional members and talking about that as we get closer to this whole debate that already started about immigration reform.
I want to know, what perspective does God have in all of this? And then let's talk about some of the real problems that are raised by those that are opposed to reform of immigration. Let's talk about that.
Great.
So we got some challenges coming up. Please stay tuned. For your willingness to be able to help us here in our television ministry, I want to send you a gift for your gift. It's written by a priest, a friend of mine. His name is Father Marty Padovani. He's a member of my community. The title of the book is Healing Wounded Relationships. It speaks to the heart of what goes on in your family, in your marriage. So many times the struggle between a husband and a wife, parents and children, even the struggle between the close family and the distant family is something that needs to have an answer, needs help. And I want to tell you that this book by my friend, Father Padovani, is going to reach into your heart in a loving, caring way. The topics that are handled are some that you're going to say, oh dear, things like communication, listening. How do you deal with conflict? How do you have greater intimacy in your marriage, especially when perhaps you've been together for too many years to now really have intimacy, not just physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy and even spiritual intimacy. The book is powerful, and the book is going to enable you to find the peace and the bridge that you're looking for to be able to come to the fullness of what it means to have a life together. Remember, Father Marty Padovani, Healing Wounded Relationships. make sure you get in touch with us through your check, through your donation, and ask, please, would you send me that important book that can bring healing to my marriage, to my family? Please do it right now. Hilda, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, in the midst of all of the pain and anguish and the courage that many people have, where should we as followers of Jesus and followers of God, where should we come, and what does the Bible have to say about the importance of caring for those that are immigrants?
I am so happy you asked me that question, Father Manning. If we remember Genesis, the story of Abraham and Sarah, they were asked to leave their home and travel. That's what God told them, come on over and I'm gonna bless you in this new land. And we know the story. And throughout the Bible, we have stories of, immigrants. The story of Joseph who goes into Egypt.
Yes, that's
and
right.
then later on, he's able to bring his own family. And eventually, they become immigrants again during Moses' time.
They got to go back to the Canaanites that are living in the Holy Land.
So throughout the Bible and the stories in the Bible, we learn that there's immigrants. And because of that, we also see stories of God telling us how to treat the immigrant. In both Leviticus and Deuteronomy, we see that God asks us that to treat a stranger like one of us. And not only to treat them with dignity.
The Bible says this. You're saying the Bible says
that. The Bible states it. Not only to treat them like one of ours, but to love them.
To be part of the family even.
To be part of our family, part of our culture, part of our everyday life. And so there is a true calling by God, I think, that is still exists today. But for whatever reason, it's easier to criminalize those who all they're trying to do is come and live a better life. And I think that's where we sometimes might fail to realize, to remember that we are passing here on this earth. We are also immigrants just here on this earth ourselves. And so I think that's part of that eternal teaching and the gospel teaching when they go back to talking and reference the immigrant, is trying to make us aware that we are also passing through here. But while I am here, I'm going to try to make this a better, a just world. That's what I feel my own personal calling is. One, to create awareness of the injustices that exist in our everyday life. And then what can we also do to correct those injustices?
And especially to the vulnerable immigrant. They're terribly vulnerable. They're almost like the baby in the womb that we're so concerned about with regard to abortion.
This is definitely an issue of life. Not defending life because it might get killed or terminated, but how it is treated in our everyday life.
Nobody wants to leave their own country.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to leave their own country because this is their home.
That's correct.
And it has to be a force that is really pushing them out of something that would be preferable if they stayed,
That's correct. My father, in my own personal story, going back to my personal story, my father had a really good job in Mexico City. He worked for an American company who, after him working there for 15 years, decided they were going to lay off all the high top people and start with new ones. And so my father, after working for 15 years in this company, loses his job and finds no other job. So what was the most natural thing to do? He had already been to the U.S. as a bracero himself, working, so he
Along
came
with
back.
Your grandfather.
Well, yeah, later on in the late years, right at the end of the bracero program, my father had been here working the farms. So he remembers that, and he remembers that there's a possibility for that better life. And what better if you can be reunited with your own mother and with your siblings and your extended family who's already been living here for a very long time. So my father decided to come to the U.S. again and get a job. And my mother was left behind taking care of us. Because the idea was for my dad to only work for a few months and then go back and see if another opportunity with another company opened up.
Back in Mexico.
Back in Mexico. But now here's the story. My mother also longed to be with her parents and her siblings who were already here.
Sure.
And so I also say my mother was always very in love with my dad. So she got up one day, did not tell us where we were going, just we knew we were going to go somewhere special, got us on a plane, and we landed in Tijuana, and she makes 2 calls. One to my father and says, I'm here and I'm with the kids. And the other one to my grandparents, who were very happy, you know, that she had finally made the move. But so those were 2 happy stories. You know, one of reuniting with her loved husband and also her parents.
Yes.
And me getting to meet my aunts and uncles and all my cousins, because we had dozens of cousins that we hadn't
never met before.
No, we did not meet them before. So that was a wonderful opportunity. I call my mom, you know, she's a brave woman. She's one of the brave women in my life. And she did. She took the courage to be able to come and reunite with her loved ones.
Tell me this. I'm going to jump in with one of the objections that you oftentimes hear. Why should we open up a path for citizenship to someone who has done something illegal?
Well, let's move a little bit beyond the illegal part, but we have 11 million people living in our country already who have a job, they're supporting themselves, they're not a burden to our economy because they're not receiving any kind of social assistance because they don't qualify for social assistance because they're here undocumented. So they're both working and they're contributing because they pay taxes. Wherever they go and make a purchase, they pay taxes. Some of them, if they work, taxes are being withdrawn from their paychecks.
Sure.
However, they don't get it back like some of the other working people do here at the end of the year. So they're contributing onto our economy. Why wouldn't we want them to become citizens? I really don't understand that. And I do know that the bill that we're talking about, this proposed bill, will make it a very long time.
And it's not going to be easy.
It's not going to be easy.
It's going to be expensive.
We're talking about, yeah, it's expensive both for them to become a registered immigrant. I can't remember the correct wording, but they're not going to be here legally. They're going to be just registered immigrants. They're going to register themselves, live on our society, continue to pay taxes, and like the rest of us, but with a different status. You know, that I feel it's a little unfair. Is this what the gospel tells us in the gospel? To treat them equally to us, to love our neighbor? They are our neighbor already.
Yes.
Leviticus says to treat the stranger like one of our own. Are we treating them fairly by not allowing them to become U.S. citizens?
I think that's the question when you throw out the word illegal, it becomes like a red flag.
Yes.
That oftentimes covers over the reality of who these people are and the pain and the struggle and the goodness and the value that we can find in them. Unless we start to face that, we're really not seeing the balance of what this whole thing is about.
You're looking at someone who was undocumented once, and the fear that I live by.
Yes.
However, I was given that chance and opportunity to legalize myself and not live in that fear. And I would hope that when we talk about and when we meet the people, that we remember that we're all children of God.
Yes.
And Catholics are about defending life, and we're talking about their life of millions of people who live here already among us.
We're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and I'm going to ask if you'd be willing to pray with some of the people that have written into us.
Oh, definitely.
And let's do that.
Pray
so
with
please,
you, yes.
Stay tuned. We're going to be praying for you and for the special people who are part of this beautiful family of our television network. I would like to invite you to participate in this program, not only with your prayers, but also with your donations. And as you reach out and give support, I would like to reach out and give you a very special gift. It's a book by a friend of mine, Father Marty Padovani, a Divine Word missionary. The title of the book is Healing Wounded Relationships. This book gets to the heart of what's breaking up families today. The struggle with communication, the struggle with commitment, the struggle with intimacy in our life. I want you to have this and not only be blessed by what you see on the television program, but you can take this home and you can take this to bed and you can allow yourself to reach the fullness of the meaning of what real love is about by allowing relationships to be healed. Hilda, one of the important questions that oftentimes is raised in objection to immigration reform is that our borders are not very, very secure. Where do the Catholic bishops stand with regard to the importance of having border control? Are they willing to say that that's important?
There are statements done by both Catholic conferences of bishops, both in the United States and in Mexico, where they agree that every country has the right to secure their borders. So that's their position on securing the borders, and that is something that that is being talked about so highly in this immigration bill or proposed bill, and our bishops support that part of the bill.
And they also support a path of legalization.
Conduit to or census through citizenship.
And that moves with real dignity and honor to the people. That's the thing that I think we need to remember. We're talking about human beings and making sure that we're willing to give them the dignity that they deserve, yes, whether it's work or whether it's freedom from the fear of wanting to have someone or having someone pull them away from their family and separate things.
They're just trying to survive like everybody else and be able to provide for their family.
And here
that's the stories.
We've got wonderful people that are yes, writing us and calling us from all across the country. And we got a beautiful telephone call from Uganda last week,
wow,
so from Africa. But Melissa in Georgia, and look at this, Georgia, and Richard in Washington. The situation of immigration isn't just in Southern California.
No.
It's in Georgia, it's in Washington, it's in Florida, where we have it here, and we also have here is California, of course. But then here, what do we got? We got North Carolina. The situation is just as acute and just as challenging.
Yes, it is.
Let's pray. Lay your hands, would you, on these people that have come. Lord, we come to before you with confidence. We want to pray especially for those people who are our guests in our own country, that are filled with fear and filled with great insecurity. Please, Lord, allow us to be Christians who reach out and care for them as brothers and sisters, as true members of our family. And bless all those that are praying for us and asking us to pray. And may Jesus' love for you always make you smile.